Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today, we continue in The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris, and we just finished Book 2 and now are proceeding to Book 3, titled The Road to the Well at the World's End. And just FYI, when we get to a new book within this novel, everything resets as far as even page numbers if you're looking physically at it, and especially the chapter numbers. So don't be alarmed if I say chapter 1, which I'm about to. This is chapter 1 of the new book, and this is entitled An Adventure in the Wood Under the Mountains. And with that said, I'll get started. Now was the night worn to the time appointed, for it was 2 hours after midnight. So he stepped out of his tent, clad in all his war gear, and went straight to the dotted oak, and found Redhead there, but with one horse, whereby Ralph knew that he had held to his purpose of going his ways to Utterbol. So he took him by the shoulders and embraced him, rough carle as he was. And Redhead kneeled to him one moment of time, and then arose and went off into the night. But Ralph got a horseback without delay, and rode his ways warily across the highway and into the wood, and there was none to hinder him. Though it was dark, but for the starlight, there was a path which the horse and not Ralph found, so that he made some way even before the first glimmer of dawn. All the more as the wood was not very thick after the first mile, and there were clearings here and there. So rode Ralph till the sun was at point to rise, and he was about the midst of one of those clearings or wood-lawns, on the further side whereof was more a thicket, as he deemed, than had yet come to. So he drew rein and looked about him for a minute. Even therewith he deemed he heard a sound less harsh than the cry of the jay in the beech trees, and shriller than the moaning of the morning breeze in the wood. So he fell to listening with both ears, and this time deemed he that he heard the voice of a woman. And therewith came into his mind that old and dear adventure of the Wood Perilous, for he was dreamy with a past eagerness of his deeds, and the long and lonely night. But yet he doubted somewhat of the voice when it had passed his ears, so he shook his rein, for he thought it not good to tarry. Scarce then had his horse stepped out, ere there came a woman running out of the thicket before him and made toward him over the lawn. So he got off his horse, and at once went to meet her, leading his horse. And as he drew nigh, he could see that she was in a sorry plight. She had gathered up her skirts to run the better, and her legs and feet were naked. The coif was gone from her head, and her black hair streamed out behind her. Her gown was rent about the shoulders and bosom, so that one sleeve hung tattered, as if by the handling of someone. So she ran up to him, crying, "Help, knight, help us!" and sank down therewith at his feet, panting and sobbing. He stooped down to her and raised her up, and said in a kind voice, "What is amiss, fair damsel, that thou art in such a plight? And what may I for thine avail? Doth any pursue thee, that thou fleest thus?" She stood sobbing a while, and then took hold of his 2 hands, and said, "O fair lord, come now and help my lady, for as me, since I am with thee, I am safe." "Yea," said he, "shall I get to horse at once?" And therewith he made as if he would move away from her. But she still held his hands, and seemed to think it good to do so, and she spake not for a while, but gazed earnestly into his face. She was a fair woman, dark and sleek and lithe, for in good sooth she was none other than Agatha, who was afore told of. Now Ralph was somewhat abashed by her eagerness, and let his eyes fall before hers. He could not but note that despite the brambles and briars of the wood that she had run through, there were no scratches on her bare legs, and that her arm was unbruised where the sleeve had been rent off. At last she spake, but somewhat slowly, as if she were thinking of what she had to say. "O knight, by thy knightly oath I charge thee, come to my lady and help and rescue her. She and I have been taken by an evil men, and I fear that they will put her to shame, and torment her ere they carry her off, for they were about tying her to a tree when I escaped. They heeded not me, who am but the maid, when they had the mistress in their hands." "Yea," said he, "and who is thy mistress?" Said the damsel, she is the Lady of the Burnt Rock, and I fear me that these men are the riders of Utterbol, and then will it go hard with her, for there is naught but hatred betwixt my lord, her husband, and the tyrant of Utterbol. Said Ralph, And how many were they? Oh, but 3, fair sir, but 3, she said, and thou so fair and strong, like the war god himself. Ralph laughed. 3 to 1 is long odds, quoth he, but I will come with thee when thou hast let go of my hand, so that I may mount my horse. But wilt thou not ride behind me, fair damsel, so wearied and spent as thou wilt be by thy night? She looked on him curiously, and laid a hand on his breast, and the hauberk rings tinkled beneath the broidered surcoat. Then she said, Nay, I had best go afoot before thee, so disarrayed as I am. Then she let him go, but followed him still with her eyes as he gat him into the saddle. She walked on beside his horse's head, and Ralph marvelled of her that all her taste she had been, she went somewhat leisurely, picking her way daintily so as to tread the smooth and keep her feet from the rough. Thus they went on into the thicket and through it, and the damsel put the thorns and briars aside daintily as she stepped, and went slower still they came to a pleasant place of oak trees, with greensward beneath them. And then she stopped, and turning she faced Ralph, and spoke with another voice than heretofore, whereas there was not rueful of whining therein, but somewhat both of glee and of mocking as it seemed. Sir Knight, she said, I have a word or two for thy ears, and this is a pleasant place, and good for us to talk together, whereas it is neither too near to her, nor too far from her, so that I can easily find my way back to her. Now, Lord, I pray thee light down and listen to me. And therewith she sat down on the grass and the bole of a great oak. But thy lady, said Ralph, thy lady? O sir, she said, my lady shall do well enough. She is not tied so fast, that she might loose herself if need were pressing. Light down, dear lord, light down. But Ralph sat still in his horse and knit his brows, and said, What is this, damsel? Hast thou been playing a play with me? Where is thy lady whom thou wouldest have me deliver? If this be but a game and play, let me go my ways, for time presses, and I have a weighty errand on hand. She rose up and came close to him, and laid a hand on his knee, and looked wistfully into his face, and she said, Nay, then, I can tell thee all the tale as thou sittest in thy saddle, for meseems short will be thy farewell when I have told it. And she sighed withal. Then Ralph was ashamed to gainsay her, and she now become gentle and sweet and enticing, and sad withal. So he got off his horse and tied him to a tree, and went and stood by the damsel as she lay upon the grass, and said, I prithee tell thy tale, and let me depart, if there be naught for me to do. Then she said, This is the first word, that as to the Red Rock I lied. My lady is the Queen of Utterbol, and I am her thrall, and it is I who have drawn thee hither from the camp. The blood mounted to Ralph's brow for anger when he called to mind how he had been led thither and thither on the folk's errands ever since he left Upmeads, but he said naught, and Agatha looked on him timidly and said, I say I am her thrall, and I did it to serve her, and because she bade me. Said Ralph roughly, And Redhead, him who I saved for torments and death, dost thou know him? Didst thou know of him? Yea, she said, I had from him what he had learned concerning thee from the sergeants and others, and then I put words into his mouth. Yea, then, quoth Ralph, then he also is a traitor. Nay, nay, she said, he is a true man, and loveth thee, and whatever he hath said to thee he troweth himself. Moreover, I tell thee here and now that all that he told thee of the affairs of Utterbol, and thine outlook there, is true and over-true. She sprang to her feet therewith, and stood before him, and clasped her hands before him, and said, I know that thou seekest the well at the world's end, and the deliverance of the damsel whom the Lord ravished from the wild man. Now I swear it by my mouth, that if thou go to Utterbol, thou art undone, and shalt come to the foulest pass there. And moreover, that so going thou shalt bring the uttermost shame and torments on the damsel. Said Ralph, Yea, but what is her case as now? Tell me. Quoth Agatha, She is no such evil case, for my lady hateth her not as yet, or but little. And which is far more, my lord loveth her after his fashion, and withal as I deem feareth her, for though she hath utterly gainsaid his desire, he hath scarce so much as threatened her, a thing unheard of. Had it been another woman, she had by this time known all the bitterness that leadeth unto death at Utterbol. Ralph paled, and he scowled on her. Then he said, And how knowest thou all the privity of the Lord of Utterbol? Who telleth thee of all this? She smiled and spake daintily, Many folk tell me that which I would know, and that is because whiles I conquer the tidings with my wits, and whiles buy it with my body. Anyhow, what I tell thee is the very sooth concerning this damsel, and this it is, that whereas she is but in peril, she shall be in deadly peril, yea, in that instant if thou go to Utterbol, thou who art her lover. Nay, said Ralph angrily, I am not her lover. I am but her well-willer. Well, quoth Agatha, looking down and knitting her brows, when thy good will towards her has become known, then shall she be thrown at once into the pit of my lord's cruelty. Yea, to speak sooth, even as it is, for thy sake, for her I heed not, I would that the Lord might find her gone when he cometh back to Utterbol. Yea, said Ralph, reddening, and is there any hope for her of getting clear off? So I deem, said Agatha. She was silent a while, and then spake in a low voice. It is said that each man that seeth her loveth her, yea, and will befriend her, even though she consent not to his desire. Maybe she hath fled from Utterbol. Ralph stood silent a while with a troubled face, and then he said, Yet thou hast not told me the why and wherefore of this play of thine, and the beguiling me into fleeing from the camp. Tell it me that I may pardon thee and pass on. She said, By thine eyes I swear that this is sooth, and that there is naught else in it than this. My lady set her love, when she first set her eyes upon thee, as forsooth all women must. As for me, I had not seen thee, though I told my lady that I had, till within this hour that we met in the wood. She sighed therewith, and with her right hand played with the rent raiment about her bosom. Then she said, She deemed that if thou camest a mere thrall to Utterbol, though she might command thy body, yet she would not gain thy love. But that if perchance thou mightest see her in hard need, and evilly mishandled, and mightest deliver her, there might at least grow up pity in thee for her, and that love might come thereof, as oft hath happened aforetime. My lady is a fair woman. Therefore I, who am my lady's servant and thrall, and who, I bid thee remember, had not seen thee, took upon me to make this adventure, like to a minstrel's tale done in the flesh. Also I spake to my lord, and told him thereof, and though he jeered at my lady to me, he was content, because he would have her set her heart on thee utterly, since he feared her jealousy, and would fain be delivered of it, lest she should play some turn to his newly beloved damsel, and do her a mischief. Therefore did he set thee free in words, meaning, when he had thee safe at Utterbol again, as he nowise doubted to have thee, to do as he would with thee, according as occasion might serve. For at heart he hateth thee, as I could see well. So a little before thou didst leave the camp, we, the queen and I, went privily into a place of the woods, but a little way hence. There I disarrayed both my lady and myself, so far as was needful for the playing out the play which was to have seemed to thee a real adventure. Then came I to thee, as if by chance hap, that I might bring thee to her. And if thou hadst come, we had a story for thee, whereby thou mightest not for very knighthood forbear to succour her, and bring her whither she would, which in the long run had been Utterbol, but for the present time was to have been a certain strong house appertaining to Utterbol, and nigh unto it. This is all the tale, and now if thou wilt, thou mayst pardon me, or if thou wilt, thou mayst draw out thy sword, and smite off my head. And forsooth I deem that were the better deed. She knelt down before him, and put her palms together, and looked up at him beseechingly. His face darkened as he beheld her thus, but it cleared at last, and he said, Damsel, thou wouldst turn out but a sorry maker, and thy play is naught. For seest thou not that I should have found out all the guile at Utterbol, and owe thy lady hatred rather than love thereafter? Yea, she said, but my lady might have had enough of thy love by then, and would be like have let thee alone to fall into the hands of the Lord. Lo, now, I have delivered thee from this, so that thou art quit both of the Lord and the lady and me. And again I say that thou couldst scarce have missed, both thou and my damsel, of a miserable ending at Utterbol. Yea, said Ralph softly, and as if by speaking to himself, yet am I lonely and unholpen. Then he turned to Agatha and said, The end of all this is that I pardon thee, and must depart forthwith, for when ye two come back to the camp, then presently will the hunt be up. She rose from her knees and stood up before him humbly, and said, Nay, I shall requite thee thy pardon thus far, that I will fashion some tale for my lady, which will keep us in the woods 2 days or 3, for we have provided victual for our adventure. Said Ralph, I may at least thank thee for that, and will trust in thee to do so much. Quoth she, Then might I ask a reward of thee, since forsooth other reward awaiteth me at Utterbol. Thou shalt have it, said Ralph. She said, The reward is that thou kiss me ere we part. It must needs be according to my word, said Ralph. Yet I must tell thee that my kiss will bear but little love with it. She answered not, but laid her hand on his breast, and put up her face to him, and he kissed her lips. Then she said, Knight, thou hast kissed a thrall and a guileful woman, yet one that shall smart for thee. Therefore grudge not the kiss, nor repent thee of thy kindness. How shalt thou suffer? Said he. She looked on him steadfastly a moment, and said, Farewell, may all go good with thee. Therewith she turned away and walked off slowly through the wood. And somewhat he pitied her, and sighed as he got into his saddle. But he said to himself, How might I help her? Yet true it is that she may well be an evil case. I may not help everyone. Then he shook his rein and rode his ways. Chapter 2. Ralph rides the wood under the mountains. A long way now rode Ralph, and naught befell him but the fashion of the wood. And as he rode, the heart within him was lightened, that he had escaped from all the confusion and the lying of those aliens, who knew him not, nor his kindred, and yet would all use him each for his own ends. And withal he was glad that he was riding all alone upon his quest, but free, unwounded, and well-weaponed. The woods was not very thick whereas he rode, so that he could see the whereabouts of the sun, and rode east as far as he could judge it. Some little victual had he with him, and he found woodland fruit ripening here and there, and eked out his bread therewith. Neither did water fail him, for he rode a good way up along a woodland stream that cleft the thicket, coming down as he deemed from the mountains, and thereby he made the more way. But at last he deemed that he must needs leave it, as it turned over much to the north. The light was failing when he came to a woodlawn, amidst of which was a pool of water, and all that day he had no adventure with the beast or man, since he had sundered from Agatha. So he lay down and slept there with his naked sword by his side, and awoke not till the sun was high in the heavens next morning. Then he arose at once and went on his way after he had washed him and eaten a morsel. After a little the thick of the wood gave out, and the land was no longer flat as it had been, but was of dales and hills, not blinded by trees. In this land he saw much deer, as hart and wild swine, and he happened also on a bear, who was about a honey tree, and had taken much comb from the wild bees. On him Ralph drew his sword, and drave him exceeding loath from his purchase, so that the knight dined off the bear's thieving. Another time he came across a bent, where on the south side grew vines well-fruited, and the grapes a-ripening, and he ate well thereof before he went on his way. Before nightfall he came on to the same stream again, and it was now running straight from the east, so he slept that night on the bank thereof. On the morrow he rode up along it a great way again, till again it seemed to be coming overmuch from the north, and then he left it, and made on east as near as he could guess it by the sun. Now he passed through thickets at whiles not very great, and betwixt them rode hilly land grassed mostly with long coarse grass, and with whin and thorn trees scattered about. Thence he saw again from time to time the huge wall of the mountains rising up into the air like a great black cloud that would swallow up the sky. And though the sight was terrible, yet it gladdened him, since he knew that he was on the right way. So far he rode, going on the hill uphill, till at last there was a great pine wood before him, so that he could see no ending to it, either north or south. It was now late in the afternoon, and Ralph pondered whether he should abide the night where he was, and sleep the night there, or whether he should press on in hope of winning to some clear place before dark. So, whereas he was in a place both rough and waterless, he deemed it better to go on, after he had rested his horse, and let him bite the herbage a while. Then he rode his ways, and entered the wood, and made the most of the way. Chapter 3. Ralph meeteth with another adventure in the wood under the mountain. Soon the wood grew very thick of pine trees, though there was no undergrowth, so that when the sun sank it grew dark very speedily. But he still rode on in the dusk, and there were but few wild things, and those mostly voiceless, in the wood, and it was without wind and very still. Now he thought he heard the sound of a horse going behind him or on one side, and he wondered whether the chase were up, and hastened what he might, till at last it grew black night, and he was constrained to abide. So he got off his horse, and leaned his back against a tree, and had the beast reins over him. And now he listened again carefully, and was quite sure that he could hear the footsteps of some hard-footed beast going nowise far from him. He laughed inwardly, and said to himself, "If the chaser were to pass but 3 feet from my nose, he would be none the wiser, but if he hear me or my horse." And therewith he cast a lap of his cloak over the horse's head, lest he should whinny, if he became aware of the other beast. And there he stood abiding, and the noise grew greater, till he could hear clearly the horse hoofs drawing nigh, till they came very nigh, and then stopped. Then came a man's voice that said, "Is there a man anigh in the wood?" Ralph held his peace till he should know more. And the voice spake again in a little while, "If there be a man anigh, let him be sure that I will do him no hurt. Nay, I may do him good, for I have meat with me." Clear was the voice, and as sweet as the April blackbird sings. It spake again, "Naught answereth, yet meseemeth I know surely that a man is anigh, and I am aweary of the waste, and long for fellowship." Ralph hearkened, and called to mind tales of wayfarers entrapped by woodwives and evil things. But he thought, "At least this is no sending of the Lord of Utterbol, and St. Nicholas to aid, I have little fear of woodwights. Withal I shall be but a dastard if I answer not one man, for fear of I know not what." So he spake in a loud and cheerful voice, "Yea, there is a man anigh, and I desire thy fellowship, if we might but meet. But how shall we see each other in the blackness of the wildwood night?" The other laughed, and the laugh sounded merry and sweet, and the voice said, "Hast thou no flint and fire steel?" "No," said Ralph. "But I have," said the voice, "and I am fain to see thee, for thy voice soundeth pleasant to me. Abide till I grope about for a stick or two." Ralph laughed in turn as he heard the newcomer moving about. Then he heard the click of the steel on the flint, and saw the sparks showering down, so that a little piece of wood grew green against his eyes. Then a little clear flame sprang up, and therewith he saw the tree stems clearly, and some 20 yards from him a horse, and a man stooping down over the fire, who sprang up now and cried out, "It is a knight at arms! Come hither, fellow of the waste. It is 5 days since I have spoken to a child of Adam. So come nigh and speak to me as a reward of thy speech. Thou shalt have both meat and firelight." "That well be played," said Ralph laughing, and he stepped forward leading his horse, for now the wood was light all about, as the fire waxed and burned clear. Ralph could see that the newcomer was clad in quaintly fashioned armor after the fashion of that land, with a bright steel sallet on the head, and a long green surcoat over the body armor. Slender of make was the newcomer, but not big nor tall of stature. Ralph went up to him hastily, and merrily put his hand on his shoulders and kissed him, saying, "The kiss of peace in the wilderness to thee," and he found him smooth-faced and sweet-breathed. But the newcomer took his hand and led him to where the firelight was brightest, and looked on him silently a while. And Ralph gave back the look. The strange wrought Saleh hid but little of the newcomer's face, and as Ralph looked thereon, a sudden joy came into his heart, and he cried out, "Oh, that I have kissed thy face before! Oh, my friend, my friend!" Then spake the newcomer and said, "Yea, I am a woman, and I was thy friend for a little while at Burton Abbas, and at the wantways of the Wood Perilous." Then Ralph cast his arms about her and kissed her again, but she withdrew her from him and said, "Help me, my friend, that we may gather sticks to feed our fire, lest it die and the dark come again, so that we see not each other's faces, and think that we have but met in a dream." Then she busied herself with gathering the kindling, but presently she looked up to him and said, "Let us make the wood shine wide about, for this is a feastful night." So they gathered a heap of wood and made the fire great. And then Ralph did off his helm and hauberk, and the damsel did the like, so that he could see the shapeliness of her uncovered head. Then they sat down before the fire, and the damsel drew meat and drink from her saddle-bags, and gave thereof to Ralph, who took it of her, and her hand withal. And he smiled on her and said, "Shall we be friends together, as we were at Burton Abbas and the wantways of the Wood Perilous?" She shook her head and said, "If it might be, but it may not be. Not many days have worn since then, but they have brought about changed days." He looked on her wistfully and said, "But thou wert dear to me then." "Yea," she said, "and thou to me, but other things have befallen, and there is a change betwixt." "Nay, what change?" said Ralph. Even by the firelight he saw that she reddened as she answered, "I was a free woman then. Now am I but a runaway thrall." Then Ralph laughed merrily and said, "Then are we brought the nigher together, for also I am a runaway thrall." She smiled and looked down. Then she said, "Wilt thou tell me how that befell?" "Yea," said he, "but I will ask thee first a question or two." She nodded a yea-say, and looked on him soberly as a child waiting to say its task. Said Ralph, "When we parted at the wantways of the Woods Perilous, thou saidst that thou wert minded for the Well at the World's End, and to try it for life or death. But thou hadst not the necklace which I now see thee bear, and which, seest thou, is like to that about my neck. Wilt thou tell me whence thou hadst it?" She said, "Yea, it was given unto me by a lady, mighty as I deem, and certainly most lovely, who delivered me from an evil plight and a peril past words, but whereof I will tell thee afterwards. And she it was who told me of the way to the Well at the World's End, and many matters concerning them that seeketh it, whereof thou shalt wot soon." Said Ralph, "As to how thou wert made a thrall, thou needest not to tell me, for I have learned that of those that had to do with the taking thee of Utterbol. But tell me, here are we met, two in the pathless wilds, as it were on the deep sea, and we were two seeking the same thing. Didst thou deem that we should meet, or that I should seek thee?" Now was the fire burning somewhat low, but he saw that she looked on him steadily. Yet withal her sweet voice trembled a little as she answered, "Kind friend, I had a hope that thou wert seeking me and wouldst find me. For indeed that fairest of women who gave me the beads spake to me of thee, and said that thou also wouldest turn thee to the quest of the Well at the World's End. And already had I deemed thine eyes lucky as well as lovely. But tell me, my friend, what hast befallen that lady, that she is not with thee? For in such wise she spake of thee that I deemed that naught would sunder you save death." "It is death that hath sundered us," said Ralph. Then she hung her head and sat silent a while. Neither did she speak till she had risen up and cast more wood upon the fire, and she stood before it with her back towards him. Then he spake to her in a cheerful voice, and said, "Belike we shall be long together. Tell me thy name. Is it not Dorothy?" She turned about to him with a smiling face, and said, "Nay, lord, nay. Did I not tell thee my name before? They that held me at the font bid the priest call me Ursula, after the friend of maidens. But what is thy name?" "I am Ralph of Upmeads," quoth he, and sat a while silent, pondering his dream, and how it had betrayed him as to her name, when it had told him much that he deemed true. She came and sat down by him again, and said to him, Thy questions I have answered, but thou hast not yet told me the tale of thy captivity. Her voice sounded exceeding sweet to him, and he looked on her face and spake as kindly as he knew how, and said, A short tale it is to-night at least. I came from Whitwall with a company of chapmen, and it was thee I was seeking, and the well at the world's end. All went well with me till I came to Goldburg, and there I was betrayed by a felon who had promised to lead me safe to Utterness, and tell me concerning the way to the well. But he sold me to the Lord of Utterbol, who would lead me to his house, which irked me not at first, because I looked to find thee there. Thereafter, it for shame I may tell thee, his lady and wife cast her love upon me, and I was entangled in the nets of guile. Yet since I was told and believed that it would be both ill for thee and me if I met thee at Utterbol, I took occasion to flee away. I will tell thee how in another while. She had turned pale as she heard him, and now she said, It is indeed God's mercy that thou camest not to Utterbol, nor foundest me there, for then had both we been undone amidst the lusts of those two. Or that thou camest not there to find me fled, else hadst thou been undone. My heart is sick to think of it, even as I sit by thy side. Said Ralph, Thy last word maketh me afraid, and ashamed to ask thee a thing. But tell me first, is that Lord of Utterbol as evil as men's fear would make him? For no man is feared as much unless he is deemed evil. She was silent a while, and then she said, He is so evil that it might be deemed that he has been brought up out of hell. Then Ralph looked sore troubled, and he said, Dear friend, this is the thing hard for me to say. And what wise did they use thee at Utterbol? Did they deal with thee shamefully? She answered him quietly. Nay, she said, fear not. No shame befell me, save that I was a thrall, and not free to depart. Forsooth, she said smiling, I fled away timely before the tormentors should be ready. Forsooth, it is an evil house, and a mere piece of hell. But now we are out of it and free in the wildwood, so let us forget it. For indeed it is a grief to remember it. And now once more let us mend the fire, for thy face is growing dim to me, and that misliketh me. Afterwards, before we lie down to sleep, we shall talk a little of the way whitherward we shall turn our faces tomorrow. So they cast on more wood and pineapples, and sweet it was to Ralph to see her face come clear again from out of the murk of the wood. Then they sat down again together, and she said, We too are seeking the well at the world's end. Now which of us knows more of the way? Who is to lead, and who is to follow? Said Ralph, If thou know more than I, it is little that thou knowest. Sooth it is that for many days past I have sought thee that thou mightest lead me. She laughed sweetly, and said, Yea, knight, and was it for that cause that thou soughtest me, and not for my deliverance? He said soberly, Yet in very deed I set myself to deliver thee. Yea, she said, then since I am delivered, I must needs deem of it as if it were through thy deed. And as I suppose thou lookest for a reward therefore, so thy reward shall be, that I will lead thee to the well at the world's end. Is it enough? Nay, said Ralph. They held their peace for a minute. Then she said, Maybe when we have drunk of that water and are coming back, it will be for thee to lead. For true it is that I scarce know whither to wend, since amidst of the dreaming of the well, and of other matters, my home that was as gone like a dream. He looked at her, but scarce as if he were heeding all her words. Then he spoke. Yea, thou shalt lead me. I have been led by one or another ever since I have left Upmeads. Now she looked on him somewhat ruefully, and said, Thou wert not hearkening e'en now, so I say it again, that the time shall come when thou shalt lead me. And Ralph's mind had sprung up again that journey from the water of the oak tree. So he strove with himself to put the thought from him, and sighed and said, Dost thou verily know much of the way? She nodded yea, say. Knowest thou of the rock of the fighting man? Yea, she said. And of the sage that dwelleth in this same wood? Most surely, she said, and tomorrow evening, or the morrow after, we shall find him, for I have been taught the way to his dwelling, and I wot that he is now called the Sage of Swevenham. Yet I must tell thee that there is some peril in seeking to him, whereas his dwelling is known of the Utterable riders, who may follow us thither, and yet again I deem that he will find some remedy there too. Said Ralph, Whence didst thou learn all this, my friend? And his face grew troubled again, but she said simply, She taught it to me who spake to me in the wood by Hampton under Scar. She made as if she noted not the trouble in his face, but said, Put thy trust in this, that here and with me thou art even now nigher to the well at the world's end than in any other creature on earth. Yea, even the Sage of Swevenham may be dead or gone hence, yet have I the tokens to find the rock of Fighting Man, and the way through the mountains, though I say not but that he may make it all clearer. But now I see thee drooping with the grief of days bygone, and I deem also that thou art weary with the toil of the way, so I rede thee lie down here in the wilderness and sleep, and forget grief till tomorrow is a new day. Would it were come, said he, that I might see thy face in the clearer, yet I am indeed weary. So he went and fetched his saddle, and lay down his head thereon, and was presently asleep. But she, who had again cast wood on the fire, sat by his head watching him with a drawn sword beside her, till the dawn of the woodland began to glimmer through the trees. Then she also laid herself down and slept. This is the end of chapters 1 through 3 of Part 3 of The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris. In the next video, we will proceed to chapter 4 entitled, They Ride the Wood Under the Mountains. Thank you for listening.